Good morning. I'm Chip Osborne, and I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about what it takes to do an organic lawn. As you're all aware, here in South Portland, there are ordinances in place that prohibit the use of synthetic pesticides and dictate the kind of fertilizers and the frequency and the timing with which you can use them. In Portland, we also have an ordinance in place that deals with synthetic pesticides. So how do we do this and what's this all about? You may have heard that doing an organic lawn is too expensive or that it doesn't really work. And in my experience, I've been in professional horticulture for over 45 years. And for the last 20 years, my specialty has been working in situations where grass has been managed previously in a chemical framework. And now we are teaching and instructing how that happens in an organic situation. First thing that we want to do is to develop an expectation. There's high expectations, medium and low expectations, and believe me, high expectations is not always good, and lower expectations certainly is not bad. It's the right expectation for the site. So even though I manage extremely high profile properties like professional baseball stadiums and high profile soccer fields, I'm not the guy that's going to tell you that clover is a bad thing because clover has a valuable place in a lawn. So it is something that we should not feel bad about embracing. And a few weeds in a lawn is not the end of the world. Weeds are just misplaced plants. When they encroach in our turf area, they're branded as weeds, but in many other situations, they would be desirable parts of the landscape, either being food or habitat. So this brings us to our lawn. How do we do this and what do we do? First thing that we're going to do is to do a soil test. We should never do anything or make any product applications until we have a soil test in hand. And the soil test is going to tell us what nutrients we already have in the soil. It's going to tell us the relative acidity or alkalinity, known as the pH. And that will dictate whether or not we use lime to raise the pH. Here in Maine, the ideal pH for turfgrass soils is between 6.5 and 7.0. So if we're substantially below 6.5 on that soil test, we're going to go out and buy lime and apply it according to package directions. If our pH is in that desired range, then we don't need to undergo that expense. As far as fertilizer goes, the soil test is going to dictate to us what we do. Most soil tests that come back here in Maine will show a relatively good amount of phosphorus in the soil. So any turfgrass fertilizer that we use should be zero phosphorus. That, phosphorus is something that can cause an issue. It can be problematic. It can cumulatively build up in the soil. So we're looking for phosphorus-free fertilizers, and a soil test generally will confirm that's what we need. So we save money because we're not out purchasing something that we don't need. So really it boils down to we may need a nitrogen source and we may need a potassium source, and those can be very easily found in an organic fertilizer. So we have the soil test, and the soil test begins to be our guide. If everything is relatively in balance, or if we make the necessary corrections, we don't need to repeat until the 3-year point. And then we retest to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So turfgrass needs some type of fertility if we're trying to manage to the higher set of expectations. So there is an ordinance in place that says how much fertilizer you can use, the rate of nitrogen that can be applied, the timing of the year it can be applied, and the cumulative amount that can be put down. If we have modest expectations, which is actually a very appropriate expectation, as I mentioned, we're not needing a lot of fertilizer. The most important concept that I can tell you is that we are not swapping out product. If you have used a synthetic chemical-based fertilizer in the past, which is generally water soluble, we're now moving you to an organic fertilizer that is water insoluble. The big difference is the synthetic fertilizer breaks down on contact with moisture, either rain or irrigation. Organic fertilizer has nothing to do with moisture. It is the microbial life in the soil. that breaks down that organic nitrogen and converts it to the form that the plant can use. So we are not swapping product. We are now going to learn to manage as a system. And the fertilizer is just one part of the system. The goal in the system is to address soil biological life, the exclusive use of organic fertilizers as inputs when needed, and then good cultural practices like mowing your grass at 3 inches and aerating for the relief of compaction if that's necessary. So we're thinking beyond NPK, and NPK means nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, because organic fertilizers feed that soil biological life. So our goal now is to feed the soil and feed the microbes so that they can in turn feed the plant. We may choose to do an application of something as simple as carbon, which is a granular humate, which is easy to purchase. It's inexpensive, and it does not have an NPK analysis. It's strictly food to feed the microbes. So if we have any one of those expectations I mentioned, if we embark on a plan for 2 years of beginning to address and feed the microbes, by the time we get through at the 3 year point, those microbes are going to work for us. And we find that our dependence on fertilizer goes way down. And we can manage to the same expectations with less product input. And that's the goal of all this, is to reduce inputs into the soil and allow that to function more naturally. As I mentioned, 3 inches is the ideal stress-free height to grow any of the grasses here in this part of Maine. Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, fine fescue if it's shade, or perennial ryegrass, or any combination of those. All are appropriate. It's always best to choose the cultivars or the varieties that are best suited to this region in Maine, and your local nurseries and supply centers will have those kinds of products. Overseeding is my number one defense against weeds. So assuming we've done our soil test and we now understand how we're going to fertilize, we may do a little fertilizer in the spring, we may do fertilizer in the fall. We're not doing it in the hot weather in the summer like we have right now. But the other part of it beyond that is the cultural side of things, that the grass wants to be 3 inches, which is the ideal stress-free height. Grass seed is critically important. As I mentioned, that's my herbicide. So if I don't have weed killers anymore that I'm allowed to use on a regular basis, I have to rely on grass seed and good cultural strategies to thicken that lawn, because I know that an aggressively growing lawn is going to choke out most weed populations. Certainly not all, but most. 80 to 85% of the weeds that somebody might have in their lawn, we can get rid of them culturally over time. It doesn't happen immediately. It's not quick fix, instant gratification, but it's something that we build to over time. So as we use appropriate fertilizers, we feed the microbes, we get them working aggressively, we aerate to introduce oxygen. Oxygen feeds those microbes, supports the root of the turfgrass system, and introduce grass seed, a little bit of carbon to feed the microbes, and we can have an annual program as simple and as inexpensive as that. Now, if we're looking to really do something on our lawn and make an improvement, and we've decided that, well, we have this lawn and I'd like to improve it, and how do I do that organically? And this is a very timely discussion, because now is the time to begin making those plans. Here in this region of Maine, we can go anywhere from, the second or third week of August through the third or fourth week of September. And we can make a change and a simple renovation. How do we do that? We might go the week before Labor Day or the week after. That's absolutely the ideal timing, because we need to leave enough time on the other end for this grass to grow and get established. Remember that when you plant a grass seed, there are 2 phases that seed goes through. One is germination, when you see it pop up from the ground and you see that first green sprout. The other is the establishment, the amount of time it takes for that to grow into a strong plant on its own. So germination can be anywhere from 7 days to 3 weeks, depending on the kind of seed we use. Establishment is anywhere from 24 days to another 21 or 30 days after that to get itself to be strong. So we want the lawns here in Maine to be fully established by Halloween at the latest. So around this Labor Day time frame, I suggest that we might cut our grass short. We'll put aside that 3-inch height for the moment, and we'll cut it down to 2 inches. It is always a good idea to use a piece of equipment called a power rake or verticutter, or people sometimes call it a dethatching machine. It's like a lawnmower. You simply walk behind. It has flexible metal tines that spin, and it actually pulls through the lawn. And we can reduce the density of that lawn by 25 or 30%. We're going to pull out any thatch. If you have crabgrass that's gotten in there, this machine is excellent for ripping out crabgrass. Now, we know crabgrass is going to die with the first frost, but we don't want to wait that long to get it out of the system. So we dethatch, and we do that relatively aggressively. Then we rake out all of that debris, take it off and compost it, and then that leaves us with the stage where we'll come in and hopefully we can aerate. Either a contractor could come in and do it, or if you have a pickup truck and the ability to bring it back, it can be rented at any of the big box stores, and we would aerate the lawn. And aerating is simply going over it with a mechanical piece of equipment that's going to pull what we call plugs and leave holes 3 inches deep in the lawn and pull the plug out. That hole, that channel is introducing oxygen, loosening the soil and introducing oxygen. So now we've cut the grass, we've dethatched it, we've aerated it, and now we're going to come in, and if we have the ability, compost as a top dress is a wonderful addition. Compost gives us a very low level of nutrient. It gives us organic matter, it improves the organic fraction, and it's rich in microbial life. So it does 3 things for us. We have to be careful with compost. We can overdo it. We generally need to restrict that to once a year, but it takes the place of a fertilizer application. It's not a fertilizer, it's a soil conditioner, but it has definite benefits in the area of fertility. So we spread the compost and then simply overseed it. And 4 weeks later, we have a new lawn. And it can happen very quickly, and the reason that we do it, it's all about the genetics of the grass and the season of the year. So fall is absolutely the best time to grow a lawn. Day length is getting shorter, temperatures are getting cooler, and all the grasses we're growing in Maine, believe it or not, their ideal soil temperature is 55 to 65 degrees, and the ideal air temperature is 65 to 75 degrees. So that's what we see in September. So that's why everything works so well. So just in review, as a wrap-up, and I hope this has been a little bit helpful, and certainly we'll be happy to answer any questions that arise from this. But first thing we're going to do is a soil test. We're going to determine what is needed in that lawn. We are going to source an organic fertilizer, a zero phosphorus organic fertilizer. We are going to think beyond nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We're going to understand now that we're feeding the microbes in the soil. We're going to look for humic acid or a granular humate, which is a carbon source, and that will help feed the microbes for us. And then we're going to keep our grass at 3 inches, and then if we choose to aerate and overseed, the best time to do that is end of August, early September. The one thing I will tell you, that if you have a lawn that has bare spots or thin areas, it's always a good idea to go out in the spring with some grass seed, with a perennial ryegrass or a tall fescue, and fill bare spots before weeds get developed, because it's much easier to get grass growing before a weed grows. So that's the one exception to the seeding. Filling bare spots in the spring, but the comprehensive overseeding in the fall. I hope this quick overview has been helpful for you, and as I said, we can certainly follow up with more detail. Thanks very much.